Good morning. Absolute honor and privilege to be here to share my story and my learnings. I want to talk about how to claim your power to find your voice. So growing up as a young girl in India, I constantly received a very important message. I got this message from my family, from the books I read, the stories I was told, and the world around me. This was the message. Silence keeps you safe. Stay quiet, stay small, and you will be fine. Now, of course, next to breathing and eating, safety is the most important thing for our survival. So I accepted this message as my truth. And it showed up in my life in many, many ways and on different occasions. When I was about 15, 16 years old, living in Chennai, I would take the public bus to and from school. There was an occasion when I was standing in this crowded bus when I felt some strange hand touching my body. I immediately froze. I wriggled out of the situation. I wanted to protest, but I was so mortified, embarrassed, and ashamed that I didn't say anything. I stayed quiet. This happened more than once. A few years later, I studied. I did my management degree, and I thought I was a smart, competent professional, and I went to work in a large bank. And there was a meeting where my boss said something that I completely disagreed with, and I wanted to put my idea across. But I thought the better of it, and I stayed quiet. Soon I left the bank, and I moved into the world of learning and development. Now, my job was to go into a room full of strangers, much older men most of the time, and teach them, among other things, selling skills. And during one such program, one of the leaders in the audience, my participant, he said, "I have a question." I said, "Yes." He said, "I've been selling for 15 years. I know everything about this. What is a new thing that you can teach me?" Was what I said. I wanted to come back with this witty remark, to have this brave conversation. Instead, I could only stammer a very incoherent reply. How many of you felt that on many occasions you wanted to speak up? You wanted to have this brave conversation, but you avoided it. You wanted to speak truth to power and challenge old norms, but instead you stayed quiet. Silence was a blanket that kept me safe until it started suffocating me. I wanted to throw it off, but I didn't know how. And I was really puzzled. I'm a well-educated, confident woman, so why was this happening to me? Luckily, over the period of time, my work in leadership development, coaching, my passion for diversity, inclusion, and gender equality gave me some confidence. But there are still many conversations that I don't want to have. It was only a few years ago I started working on research for my book. I researched power and inclusion, and I found some answers. People from marginalized communities, from minority groups, don't find it easy or natural to speak up. And it's not because of cowardice or stupidity. It is not easy. Why was this happening? Well, today I would like to share with you 3 strategies that keep us from our power and 3 ways in which we can overcome these strategies and reclaim our power and find our voice. All systems, all structures, whether it's patriarchy, casteism, communism, racism, capitalism, any ism, all of them use these strategies to keep people from taking their power, to keep people oppressed and suppressed. And these strategies have played out in all our lives, including mine. So what are these strategies? I call the first one debtor, the strategy of deterrence. Many of you would have heard this story. In 1992, a village social worker called Bhanwari Devi protested against the child marriages that were rampant in this area, in her area. In retaliation, she was assaulted and brutally gang raped by 5 men from the upper caste. Her family was ostracized, they were thrown out of the village, and it took her years to get any kind of justice. The message was very clear. Speak up against us and something terrible will happen to you. This is the strategy of deterrence. It sounds like this. Don't do that or something bad will happen to you. Don't go out late at night. Don't wear clothes like this. Don't speak against your elders. Don't challenge authority. And often something bad does. So the strategy of deterrence keeps us living in fear, living in anxiety, and feeling hesitant all the time. I still hesitate to go out late at night. It shows up in my life. And I tell my daughter now, don't go out too late, just be careful. It goes on. The second strategy is called diminish. Make people feel really small. There was a leader I was coaching a few years ago. He was a smart, competent person, expert in his domain in finance, but he found it difficult to speak up in meetings, especially with his global counterparts. So during our conversation, he said, I come from a humble village background. I haven't spoken in English all my childhood, and I only started during my first job. And during his first job, there were some people who mocked his accent, his pronunciation, and tried to put him down. And that experience stayed with him for such a long time that he didn't feel confident about speaking up in meetings, even though he knew the answers. People who have this, artificial sense of superiority try to make others feel inferior by insulting them, by excluding them, and by belittling them. The strategy of diminish sounds like this. You're not strong enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not competent enough. You're not good enough. You're not enough. And this diminish strategy creates low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and lots of self-doubt. We can't bring ourselves to have that conversation, to speak up, because we are not sure of ourselves. The third strategy is a little more subtle. I call it decorate. So what is decorate? It means imposing these impossibly high standards on people and then giving them a token reward for living up to these standards. Well, what is the reward? A good name. So people from these minority groups and marginalized communities are often rewarded for things like unquestioning obedience, endless patience and tolerance, modesty, humility, and silence. Now, I've experienced the effect of this decorate strategy on my life, but I didn't know it until much later. About 22 years ago, my daughter was born. I was working then, but I would feel very guilty about leaving my baby daughter at home and going to work. And then I also felt guilty that I wasn't bringing my whole self to my work and I wasn't being a good boss and a good employee. And then when my daughter was about 8-9 months old, she felt really sick. And then I thought I was the most terrible person on earth because as a mother, I allowed that to happen. I felt terrible because I couldn't live up to the expectations of being this super mom, super wife, super woman, super everything all the time. The decorate strategy sounds like this. You should do that. This is what is expected of you. You should be like this. You should behave like that. You should be a good girl. You should be a perfect human being. And this decorate strategy leaves us constantly stressed, exhausted, burnt out. We have no energy for any conversation of any kind. Now, the interesting thing is the effects of these three strategies are so deep, so well ingrained and internalized that most of the time we don't even realize that it is happening. It took me a very long time to realize that, yes, something is going on out there which is keeping me silent and quiet. But through my research, work, lots of self-introspection, I did find 3 ways to overcome the effects of these strategies. I use them a lot, and after experimenting, I'm very happy to say I use these in my work to support others, especially those who don't have a voice. What are these 3 ways? The first is to connect to your purpose. Why are you really here? What really matters to you? All the people like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Malala, Greta Thunberg were able to speak truth to power because they could connect to something much larger than themselves. That gave them strength and determination to go on. So one of the conversations I find difficult, and I still find it difficult, is the ask for help conversation. People who know me will say, yeah, I don't like going and approaching people and asking them for anything, especially personal favors. But I also run a non-profit, which is along with my family, my husband and daughter, called My Daughter's Precious, where we provide scholarships and mentorships to girls, young women from underserved backgrounds and families to complete their college education. Now, it's a passion project, purely a voluntary effort for a cause I totally believe in, which is gender equality. And in pursuit of this cause, I can actually pick up the phone and ask people to donate money, volunteer their time to be a mentor, and I feel good about doing it because it is for this cause. And I'm happy to say that today we've sent 75 girls to college just by asking people. My husband does that. He's very good at it. My daughter does it. So we all ask people for help. And I've learned from them how to ask for help for a cause that I truly believe in. So connecting to purpose can be extremely powerful. And if we spend just a few seconds thinking, what is my purpose? It can give us the strength to have the conversation. The second way is to visualize a positive outcome. When we've been at the receiving end of deter, diminish, and decorate, it's very easy to jump to the worst possible conclusion. Our mind will just automatically go there and think of all the terrible things that can happen. And these imagined fears overpower any dreams that we might have. Ever since I was a child, I had a dream of writing a book. But for many, many years, I sat with this dream thinking these dark thoughts. What if I put in a lot of effort and I never get to complete the book? Worse, I complete the book and I send it out to publishers and it gets rejected by everybody. Worse still, it gets accepted for publication and gets published, but I get terrible reviews and I find out that I'm not a writer after all. Right? Our brain gives us these very good reasons to keep us from doing the thing we fear the most but want to do the most. It took me 15 years to summon up the courage to write my first novel, incidentally, a story about a girl from Chennai who goes to work in a bank. Just coincidence. And I completed the book. It was published in 2010 and it became a bestseller. And then I wondered, why didn't I do it earlier? So connecting to positive outcomes puts us in that right frame of mind, which we need to give us that little push to take an action. Whether it's a talk, a presentation, a conversation, or anything we want to do, let's imagine what is the best thing that can happen, and we will be able to do it. The third is to evoke our powers. I do work with the ancient wisdom of archetypes. Archetypes are nothing but images, patterns, and stories that govern how we think, feel, and behave. Right? How many of us like watching movies? You will be familiar with the archetypes. The hero, the heroine, the villain, the mother. We all know what the mother looks like in our movies. Right? And the good girl, the princess. And these images exert a very deep influence on our subconscious. It governs our psyche. And these archetypes, irrespective of gender, can be a very powerful source of energy. So in my work and my research, I created something called the 6 Feminine Powers Model. And I use the word power very intentionally, Because I believe that to claim power in the outside world, we first have to discover our inner power. And the 6 feminine powers model helps women do that. I don't want to exclude men. There are many models for men as well. But I work with women in India, and I wanted to create something that spoke to any woman from our context and culture. So here are the 6 powers. You might recognize them: the Kanya, the good girl; the Apsara, the beauty; Ma, a nurturing caregiver; Rani, the noble queen; Rishika, the seeker; and Veera, the warrior. By connecting to these powers and the specific qualities associated with each power, we can be much more effective and successful across a variety of situations. So I have experimented with these. So when I need to have a tough conversation, a tough negotiation, I summon my Veera, the warrior. When I need to be confident and prepared, I use my Rishika, the wise woman, so that I can be knowledgeable and communicate with gravitas. When I'm in a heated discussion, I use my inner Rani to remain stable and cool. And this has really helped, especially in arguments I have with my husband. You know, in the early days of marriage, some of you might be familiar, there would be a point I'll say, fine, whatever, if that's what you want. Even though it would totally not be fine. But I didn't want to be the one who kicked up a fuss and fought. Now, most of the time, I can have a conversation, hold my cool, and enter into a dialogue that helps both of us. So I have benefited from these powers, and now I take it to a lot of women and use it in my coaching. And I want to conclude by sharing the real story of a woman I coached. We'll call her Megha, not her real name. So Megha is a very smart, hardworking, diligent young woman in a large organization. But she felt she wasn't growing as fast as she wanted to. During our conversation, she told me, you know, I can't be shameless and brag about my achievements and demand a promotion. It's just not done. But she wanted that promotion. During our conversations, she was able to connect to her larger purpose, which was growth and positive impact across the society. She could visualize a positive outcome where she got what she deserved. And then she could evoke her inner Apsara and her Veera and change that shameless story to a speak up for what is right story. She prepared her case. She made a presentation to the seniors. And I'm happy to say that within 6 months, Megha got the promotion that she deserved. And we both were obviously very, very happy. But she had also shifted something in her, and she discovered powers that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Alice Walker, the author, said, the most common way people give up power is by believing they don't have any. I believe that if we connect to purpose, if we visualize positive outcomes, we can overcome the effects of deter, diminish, and decorate. We can stand up and speak up. I believe that if we can connect to the powers we want to be, we can become the powerful person we all are meant to be. Thank you so much. Stay powerful.